Today we're going to talk about what does it mean to be present. We've been having a little bit of a discussion, and we just watched a conversation around being present and what that means. So let's talk. Well, let's be present.
Let's be present.
Being present.
There you go.
So one of the things she told me a long time ago that you appreciated about me was my ability to be present. Can you talk about what is it that you saw? Or what is it that you look for when people... Because I can tell you, when I'm talking to somebody and you see those glossy eyes, and you know that they're thinking about something else, and then you see them coming back, you almost just want to reach in there and pull them back out so that they can be with you. And so also when you're in a room full of people and you're having an intimate conversation with somebody, and maybe they're looking over your shoulder and they're seeing, okay, well, who's got the bigger title that's going to walk by, or who's somebody else, or they're just kind of preoccupied.
I think when... Are we both on?
Yeah, we are. We're both on here.
I think when people are passionate about what they're speaking about, and they're speaking about something that is personally meaningful to them, but hopefully isn't something that's just entirely self-serving. So one of the best examples I can ever remember of a room of people being present was right after 9/11. I was called in to meet with groups because everybody was kind of in a funk because the world had changed. And so I remember I was in a group with a bunch of attorneys, bankers, insurers, and things like that. And I did this exercise. I said, talk about a time you didn't think you'd get through in life, but you did. And it changed the way you looked at things. Because what was clear after 9/11 is life would never be the same again, but that doesn't mean it was all over. And so this was there must have been 30 in the room, and it was a networking group, and I can tell you, it's the kind of group when you have usual meetings and people give you their elevator pitch, you can attend that meeting for 5 years and still have no idea what people do.
Right.
Because I'm a banker. I sell insurance. And it's so inauthentic. But what happened is when you asked each person to talk about a time they didn't think they'd get through, and they realized how strong they were really incredibly present. So
let's move this from people in the pulpit or people up at the stage talking about intimate or very private moments or impactful moments to create that level of intimacy, to situations in everyday life, because that's what people in our Facebook friends here will be encountering, our situations. There's a family event. Today is a holiday. And there are family events going on in holidays. How does one be present at a family gathering, at a business gathering, with conversations with colleagues? What is it that we need to do to be 100% present with the person in front of you? Good to see you too, Annika from Luxembourg. Yay!
Wow.
That's my dear friend, and look her up. She's amazing. So what does it mean to really and truly be present? I've been watching some podcasts by some of the people that talk about memory, and all I'm learning is in order to have a really good memory, you have to be present, and just really being present with the person that's talking to you, and not allowing those voices of, did I feed my dog, or what, listening, waiting to speak, but really being present to listen to the other person speak.
So here's an exercise that I learned. I'm an introvert, and
you would never know it, by the way.
Well, you'll guess it. And I remember years ago, we went to my wife's, I don't know, maybe her 10th college reunion or high school reunion, or 15th or something. And because I'm an introvert, I just kept saying, can we go? I didn't know anyone there. And I tried to be a good sport, but in those days I wasn't the best sport. And so I remember it was like 5 years later or 10 years later, and I said, I'm not there as me. I'm there to enhance her time. And so I had a personal promise I made to myself that I'm going to, by the end of the evening, I'm going to speak to 3 people, and they're going to be glad they met me. And I had no idea what I was going to do. But by the end of the evening, what happened is I'd spoken to 5 people, and 3 of them, when we finished speaking, they took my hand with 2 hands and said, "It was really great meeting you." And what I realized is something I actually wrote about in my book, Just Listen, and I call it FTD delivery, not the florist company, but FTD stands for feelings, thoughts, and actions do. So what I would do is, as people were speaking to me, I would ask them a question like, well, how do you feel about meeting all these people you haven't seen for years? So what do you think about how fast time has gone? How did you know my wife? So what did you do after high school? Yada, 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 and all these things. And what happened is I was having such a good time being a good sport that my wife wanted to leave early because she was finding out about whose parents had died, whose grandparents had died, and I was there being classy. And my late mentor, Warren Bennis, he had these amazing quotes, but one of his, my favorite quotes of his, he says, "Boredom occurs when you fail to make the other person interesting." And so what happened is, as I was talking to people, and I'd say, "So what'd you feel? What'd you think? So what'd you do?" And it'd be like almost like a sailboat tacking from starboard to port. But as I was doing it, I felt myself coming out of my being introverted. I saw people being animated. And what I also realized is when you get someone to talk about something they have feelings about, what they think, and what they did, they're totally there, and they love you because you're pulling out of them the 3 parts of experience. Whereas if you're just getting into an intellectual thinking thing, it just sounds intellectual and empty.
Yes.
Or if it's just, what'd you do, where'd you go, that's just one channel.
Yes.
So it's like 3-channel listening.
Yes.
And what happened as we're driving home, and I had a great time, and my wife was the one who was sad because she was finding about all these people whose parents and grandparents and the kids who died from her class. And I said to her, when we were driving to the reunion, I was all set to be a real good sport, and then you were going to owe me big time. I was going to be this great sport and focus.
Guess what? You had a great time, didn't you?
And I said, I had such a good time. This one's on the house.
You know what? You know why you had a great time? Because you started focusing on somebody else and not on you.
Absolutely.
Because when you were in Annika, you have a question, and we'll answer it in just a little bit. She wanted to know feelings, thoughts, and then what was after. So it's feelings, thoughts,
and actions.
action.
But I call it what'd you do?
So
what
did you do? Yeah. So feelings and thoughts and do.
And
what did you do? When I hear the word introvert, what I hear in my head, because I encounter introverts in the trainings and in the coachings whenever I'm speaking and somebody comes up to me for a quick coaching moment. What I hear an introvert is someone who is afraid to come out, and they're focusing on them. What am I going to look like? How is it that I'm going to be viewed? And I don't want to say something because I am the one that's going to be looked at in a certain way, and I don't want to be judged. And when I hear extrovert, what I hear is I'm focusing out. I'm focusing on someone else. And I'll tell you, for me, being present and something that I have seen in others, and it's cost me in the memory work that I'm doing, it's cost me to even ever more present. It's really focusing on
that person in front of me as if that person was the most valuable thing that I could possibly have in my hands that I'm being entrusted with. And so every word they're saying, I'm paying really close attention to. And then I'm wondering, how can I add value to them? And so in lieu of what's going on out there or how am I viewed, I'm focusing my energy and all of my attention on them. And so at events, for example, something you could do, and it's really simple to do at an event, is go and I say this to people, go put your hand out, because once your hand is out, it's hard to bring it back in. And it only takes once to do this. Put your hand out and say, "Hi, my name is Betty. What's your story?" And then just wait with a smile. And they'll say, "Well, what do you mean, what's my story?" "Well, I came from Colombia when I was 12. Where did you come from?" And sometimes it takes a little nudging or a little bit of me telling my story, but eventually they'll start telling me their story. And every story is so interesting. People don't think they're interesting. They really are. As long as we're interested, they become interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something, if you're listening in, because you just triggered something. There's
Hey, Ken.
Hi.
And Sonia.
Hi. There's a term, you can look it up. It's called interbeing. I think it was some Vietnamese monk, but I could have it wrong. But the whole notion is interbeing is the space between you and another person, and you feed interbeing with selflessness and interest in the other person.
Yes.
And if you could have two people who are truly interested in the other person and being of service to them,
exactly,
the interbeing goes through the roof.
Yes.
And the perceived value that people experience, both people experience from the conversation, is huge.
And Mark, this is Dr. Mark Goulston, for those of you who don't know Mark, and I did not post your name on this one. I will.
Okay,
I'll go back and put your name, because I didn't. We've been doing these posts, and they have been weekly posts until I went into my 10-day Vipassana, and we're going back to the weekly posts. And one of the things that I have experienced with you, Mark, and we've become really good friends very, very quickly. Now we've known each other for a while now, but I think the reason why is because you are someone, when I describe your personality and what your essence, the essence of Dr. Mark, is that of someone who is, yes, very bright and very giving, but you give unconditionally. And you give of yourself, you give of your knowledge, you give of your brilliance, you give of your training, you give of your Rolodex or your connections, and you're also a connector, an unconditional connector. And so when we sit and we talk, I'm always thinking, how am I going to add value to you? And I know that you're always thinking, how are you going to add value to me? And so I think that's why you and I, whenever we have these conversations, we walk away feeling fulfilled. Because it's not a take, it's a give, but it's 100 give, right? You give 100%, I give 100%. I'm always thinking, oh, by the way, your book, you mentioned Just Listen. That is a book that I highly, highly recommend that every one of you pick up. And it's all about listening. You just came back from Russia, and you just spoke to the Russian Federation about the art of listening. You speak to the FBI and you teach them hostage negotiations, and it all begins with listening, with paying close attention to what's not being said. And believe it or not, these are some of the things that I'm now talking to my team about, is listen to what's not being said and paying very, very close attention. And I think a lot of it, and I've always been a good listener, but I think being involved in our conversations and in our dialogue and listening to your words of wisdom. He's got a lot of nuggets, and you have a podcast.
Prison Letters Podcast.
Prison Letters Podcast. You used to be a psychiatrist. You are a psychiatrist. You used to practice with suicide victims, and you're so good at it. The Prison Letters Podcast have how many hits, or how many people that watch it?
Well, of all the Player FM, which is one of the podcast thing, it was rated number 3 out of all the prison-related podcasts. So what I do is I read letters from inmates, because I had one of my first book was called Get Out of Your Own Way, which I just recorded the audio book. It's out.
Oh,
it's 22 years old, but it's been in the top 15 self-help books at Amazon for 10 years.
Wow.
And so I receive letters from inmates about their difficulties, and then I tune in to kind of the criminal mind and what they're struggling with. But lately I've been interviewing people who have been in prison, and I'm actually mentoring someone in the podcast, and it's remarkable how vulnerable he's willing to be. And it was interesting because recently we've been talking about the struggle to be real, because one of my challenges is I know a lot of people, and I'm pretty good with sound bites, so I can be impressive, but when I'm trying to be impressive, it's my worst self. I'm not present. I'm getting away with stuff, and my best self is when I'm listening, but I can get away with, I have some interesting stories from the FBI, but the point is, I feel like I'm doing a shtick, and I'm not
like a
present.
show.
And,
like you're not being real.
And the person I'm mentoring has the same issue, the one who was in prison. So we've been talking about that, and he actually reassured me. He said, look, if you're helping people, if the end result is people get benefit from it, it's okay if you're doing your shtick. But I still have that conflict. I have that conflict about wanting to be 100% real, whatever the heck that means.
Well, but and we're let's go ahead and end with this, because you have another appointment, and I just want to thank you for this moment. And I always thank God for moments like these, where we can just let our hair down, figuratively, and just have a dialogue and have other people benefit from our incredible dialogues that we usually have. At minimum once a week we do this. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for tuning
please
in.
Forward it to other people. Our intention in these weekly live feeds are so that others can share in the collective wisdom, in the collective experiences that you and I have had, in where we lead separate lives. I lead a business life, and in the business world, you lead a coaching life in the business world as well. But we come from different perspectives, and we're also in parallels, and so many other people can gain from this. So thank you so much.
Thank
and
you
if you have any questions, go ahead and post them on here, and we'll go ahead and answer them.
And if there's anything you want us to speak about in the future, so we can be present with you, because both of us live to serve. I think we're at our best when we live to serve.
Yes, absolutely.
And so give us something to serve.
All right. Thank you so much.
So
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.